Hey folks, welcome back to Velo Performance. Now this week I'm going to do something slightly different because on Instagram I put out an Instagram story and asked people what their questions were for me, and I've had quite a few people come back to me. Right, so this week I'm going to change the way I do things, so completely off the cuff, sort of like raw and natural. I'm going to be reading out the questions that people have sent me in from Instagram. And so, as I like to say, let's get into it. Let's just start off with question number one. What's my advice for pre-ride nutrition? Now, look, if you follow me on this YouTube channel, you'll know I've done a video on this, but to answer your question directly is this. Your nutrition on a day-to-day level is pretty much what's going to dictate your energy level. So it's not just about the pre-ride training nutrition that you need to focus on and make the priority. It is the rest of your nutrition that you need to look at to make sure that you're eating enough food that energizes you, that you can get the best out of your training and your recovery. But if we look at how to make sure that you are energized for your training, then good practice would be to make sure a couple of hours before your training session to eat a small meal that's carbohydrate rich, has a bit of protein in it, and is going to help support that training session. Now, if we give it a bit of context, if you're going to go and do a turbo training session, then you'll probably want something like a small bowl of pasta and maybe a little bit of protein, something that's easily digestible. So maybe some pasta, some tuna, and maybe a sprinkle bit of cheese on there for flavor, make it tasty. There's the one thing I talk about with nutrition, is that your nutrition needs to be able to support your training and fuel you, but you've got to like it as well. It can't be bland and boring. So this is why nutrition's so hard to get right. And a lot of people struggle with it because when they start losing weight or focusing on a diet, they make everything really bland because they think that's what needs to be to get to the weight that they need to get to. And it's such a big encompassing subject. Anyway, I'm going to move on from that. Second question was best advice to improve my cycling. Now, look, I talk about this a lot with the people that I coach at Velo Performance, and also I talk about it when people say to me, how am I still strong on a bike? How can I still ride uphill? So I can still pull big turns as I'm getting older. And the answer to that is that I've just pretty much stayed consistent with my training. Yes, it is progressive, and yes, I have some real specific training that I'm trying to do with my training to make sure that I can ride long whenever I want to, pull up hills really fast, really hold power. But here's the thing. The most important part of anybody's training is to make sure that you are consistent with it throughout the year. So you know what you're trying to get out of your training and you just stick with it. And to get the best from the training, you've got to have a good blend between intensity and recovery, easy riding, because without it, you're just going to be either carrying too much fatigue or not doing enough intensity. So the blend is the important bit. So my top advice for anybody that's wanting to improve their training is know what you're trying to achieve, write a couple of sessions that are progressive for what you want to try and do. So let's say it's hill reps, for instance. What you'll do is you'll just say, let's say 3 times 8-minute hill reps, and you do those religiously each week, and you have one other training session that complements that is high intensity, and then everything else can be really steady and just allow you to grow your aerobic engine. So just a thought process there. Now, top tips for climbing faster. Now that's not a training question, it's more like what would you do, how would you advise me to ride faster going up hills? Well, it's a really good question, and the thing I've noticed is a lot of people that ride bikes don't have very good gear selection. So you've got to remember that a hill just doesn't go straight up in one gradient. It changes all the time. So 1 minute it could be 10%, next minute it could be 4%. So you need to change your gears to be as efficient as you can and as fast as you can. And you need to learn to be able to ride in and out of the saddle. I think that's really important. It's something I get the cyclists that I coach to think about when they're doing their hill reps. It's like, don't always just sit down, don't always just stand up. You've got to have a bit of a blend of both. So train the hill in different angles. And sometimes I'll make them do hill reps seated all the way up for the whole of the session. And sometimes I'll get them to do a hill rep session in and out of the saddle because I want them to have the ability to do both. So the best climbing advice is choose your gears and make sure they are right for the terrain that you're riding. So if it's really steep, you have to think about what you're doing. Is your cadence too high, too low? And also make sure when you're riding the hill that you judge the effort. Don't go fast into the bottom of the hill and then die halfway up. Think about how long that hill's going to be and try and keep your effort level as consistent as you can all the way to the top. Quick fire round. Tubeless or tubes? I've made the transition over to tubeless, and I tell you what, they have been brilliant. So I'm always going to say tubeless. Rim brake or disc? Again, I've made the transition over to disc over the last 2 years, and 100% I'm going to say disc. Now, people say to me, aren't discs just really for the winter and for the wet? Well, the answer to that question for me is no, they're for all conditions. Because when I was going through France from Geneva to Nice, I was descending with some mates who were on rim brakes and I was on disc, and they were saying it's not fair because I was able to hold my speed and brake a load later than they could, so I could go into the corner way faster than they could and then keep my speed as quicker out of the corner than they could. They're saying it wasn't funny watching me descend faster than they are. And then someone also asked, what book am I reading? Well, actually, I'm reading this. I'm reading Atomic Habits by James Clear, and I kind of like cherry pick the chapters, which you're probably supposed not to do, but do you know what? It's a great book. It just helps you be clear on how to sort of get clear in yourself. So highly recommend that book. And then the last question that someone asked me was, what's my advice for descending? Well, I thought about this for a bit, and then I thought, actually, do you know what? When I was learning to descend better, I slowed everything down a little bit. So rather than trying to chase myself around corners and make mistakes, I started slowing down and thinking about what I need to be doing. So classic answers to this, and this is quite a cool thing to think about, is look where you want to go. If you follow all the really great descenders, Julian Alaphilippe, Peter Sagan, they look where they're going around the corner, which is really important, because if you are looking on the ground, I can guarantee you one thing: you will go round the corner like it's a 50p piece, and it will feel really uncomfortable and unstable. Be relaxed. That's really important, because think about it, when you're descending and going fast, if you tighten up and you get nervous, the bike suddenly starts to be really erratic and it becomes difficult to maneuver. And that's because you're tight and your bike is tight. So you just need to relax through the hands, through the shoulders and through the hips. Through the hips is an interesting one, because you go around the corner, if you just relax a little bit, you'll find that the whole body just flows around the corner with you. So it's quite a cool thing to think about. And then obviously you'll hear, when you read up on these things, it says do all your braking before the corner. Now, that's really important, obviously, but here's the other thing. Occasionally, we go into our corners, so we've still got a lot of speed and we think we've done the braking we need to do, but we need to take a bit more off. If you find yourself in that situation, just dab the brakes a little bit. Don't just hold on to the brakes, because that'll lock your back wheel up and you'll come flying off. You don't want to be doing that. And then another thing I think that a lot of people don't talk about, which is kind of important, is, and it's only learning this through time, is that as you go around the corner, make sure you're in the right gear to come out of that corner and keep a little bit of power on as you come up. That way you can keep your speed. But if you're in the wrong gear, so it's too light or too heavy, then you can actually lose your speed as you come out of the corner. And then the last thing I'll finish off with is, if you're learning and you've been a bit nervous in descending, don't do all of this at fast speeds. Do it at a speed that you feel comfortable at, and then start adding the speed in. And that's the thing I found, that when I started to learn how to descend quicker, I slowed it right down and really put all those points that I've talked about into practice. Really helps with your descending. And also, don't forget, last thing, well, remember, sometimes we can descend really well because we're very confident and we're relaxed and we're just feeling really good about ourselves. And sometimes we descend and we're just not in that frame of mind to do so. When you find yourself in that position, don't stress about it. It's really normal. I hope all these answers to your questions help, and I'll be back next week. Cheers, thanks for watching.